There are 11 games that stand between me and the next game that I'm actually looking forward to playing, so today, let's smash out 6 of them. My name is Graeldon, I'm on an impossible journey to review every Steam game in alphabetical order, and today we're playing 1000 Amps, 1000 Cuts Jomaku, 1000 Days to Escape, 1000 Man General, 1000 Missiles Defense of Tornwa, and 1000 Needles. Let's begin. See this guy? He's an intruder and he jump scared me. And this isn't a horror game. This is a puzzle platformer crossed with a Metroidvania called 1000 Amps, which upon reflection managed to work a great dad joke into the narrative that totally flew under the radar until I started writing this review. But wait, I hear you say. Why are you playing 1000 Amps already? What happened to the hit game with 0 Steam reviews, 100 player Twitch chat party pack? Are you just skipping over it because it's a dead Twitch plugin that only offers a series of multiplayer minigames that requires a minimum of 100 people in the audience to be playable? Yes, weirdly astute viewer, that is exactly right. In fact, about a month or 2 ago, depending on when this video releases, I actually started streaming on Twitch as well as YouTube, to which my best stream amassed a total of 3 viewers at once. So what I will say is this: if my streams ever start hitting those kinds of numbers, I promise we'll go back and try this game to see if it actually works. So, back to 1000 Amps, where I left you with the tantalizing promise of a groan-worthy dad joke. In this game, you play as Plug, a sentient light bulb that is trying to return light to the amp tree system after an intruder worked their way in and disabled core functions, plunging everything into darkness. So you could say that everything is about electricity. Yeah, I know, it's bad, but I needed someone else to share the same suffering that I had when I figured it out, so you're welcome. Released onto Steam way back in 2012 by Brandon Brizzy and costing $7.50 dues, you might think that this looks like the perfect cozy game for Steam Deck or a controller, but you'd actually be out of luck as you'll need both WASD controls and mouse movement to play. Controls are also not rebindable within the game because, well, there's no in-game menu. In fact, it looks like this was originally a Flash game that was ported to Steam. It's hard to show in the footage, but it launches in a tiny resolution and then forces full screen mode, and if you try to Alt-Tab out, the game just freezes completely. Hopefully this explains why everything looks a bit pixelated. It's because it is. The goal in 1000 Amps is actually pretty simple, with some thoughtful mechanics added in. The world is divided into individual puzzle rooms, and the goal in each room is the same. Find and touch each of the light panels to permanently illuminate the room. Doing so is not a requirement to progress, but until you do, you'll quite literally be trying to navigate in the dark, because only tiles that you touch will become visible. Your progress towards lighting up the room is shown by the battery meter in the top right of the screen, with each segment representing a light panel that you need to find. Filling up the battery also has a secondary function. It increases your jump height. This creates a lovely flow to exploration, where finding each panel is rewarded by more and more of the room becoming accessible. That said, you'll actually pass through many rooms without fully illuminating them, as Brandon has cleverly designed them so that some rooms can be navigated with a certain battery level, but you might need additional power-ups to fully light them up. It's also important to note that if you leave a room without fully lighting it, the battery depletes to 0. This can sometimes get frustrating as it means you're navigating in the dark again, but I think it adds to the ambience of the game, which is quite important considering that most of the game is pretty silent, other than the occasional piano note as you touch a light panel. Fully lit up rooms then play a simple piano melody, but this cuts off as soon as you move to another room, creating a sense of unease that ties nicely to the theme of an intruder in the system. As you continue to explore, you'll find power-ups that grant new abilities and unlock new areas to explore, the first of which is the ability to teleport to any location on screen, as long as you have at least one segment of battery and as long as the tile doesn't have an X on it. This is aimed with the mouse and feels pretty natural to use. There is a downside though, and it's that every tile around the location you teleported from will go dark, often turning off the light tiles, adding another layer to the puzzle complexity. I never managed to teleport myself somewhere that I couldn't teleport back out of, but I did think I was stuck at one point. This led me to figure out an essential movement technique where you teleport immediately after jumping, allowing your momentum to carry you upwards from your destination tile, quite literally taking this mechanic to new heights. After unlocking the teleport ability, you'll fall down the trunk of the tree and arrive at a small hub area and meet your guide, Otto, who has been communicating with you since the start of the game. From here, you have 4 directions to progress in, however only one is really viable right away. Each of these 4 areas will lead to unlocking new abilities. The first is a sonar that allows you to reveal hidden tiles while stationary. Next is a light boost that extends your touch radius as your battery fills up, allowing you to reach past tiles. Then spikes that destroy pests that turn lights off and love making your life more difficult. And lastly, a super jump that activates when your battery is full, allowing you to launch yourself into the atmosphere. Armed with these abilities, you return to Otto, who has managed to back the intruder into a corner, and the final showdown begins. Weirdly enough, most non-combat puzzle games don't really benefit from having a boss fight, and 1000 Amps is no exception. The premise is fairly simple. The fight is divided into 4 stages, each progressively harder than the last. In each stage, you need to activate all of the light tiles and then touch the intruder to deal damage and move to the next stage. Of course, the intruder isn't keen on this, so they'll be fighting back by firing a 3x3 deletion bomb at you, which detonates after a second or 2. This bomb not only darkens any visible tiles in the area, including light tiles, but if you're caught in it, you die. And dying means returning to the hub area and starting the fight from the beginning, because you don't have health. At first, there is a lengthy pause between attacks, but as you move through the stages, the intruder seemingly becomes more desperate, and their attack speed and number of bombs increases. They'll also attack as quickly as possible when all the light tiles are activated in an attempt to turn at least one off before you're able to touch them. The end result is this chaotic mess of teleporting around the room trying to activate light tiles while the intruder tries to kill you and turn them off again. And unfortunately, the game engine sometimes gets confused about what is visible and what isn't, causing you to try to move left or right only to be unable to due to an invisible wall that shouldn't be there, and then you die. This in isolation is enough to be frustrating. However, after almost an hour of attempts, I was on the verge of giving up because I couldn't seem to beat the 4th and presumably final stage of the fight. The attacks just came too quickly to dodge, and I couldn't find any light tiles to allow me to teleport away to safety. I decided to take a breather, and when I did, I looked up the store page and saw that, luckily, 1000 Amps had enough players that someone actually wrote an achievement guide for it. So, thank you, Omniscurious. You're a legend. It turns out that although the final boss fight unlocks after finding the 5th upgrade, it's actually impossible to beat until you find the 6th hidden upgrade that permanently maxes out your battery meter. To find this, you'll need to navigate through a hidden passageway that takes you outside of the tree, returning you back to the very start of the game. Oh, and make sure to save on the way, because if you drop down in the wrong place, you can actually miss the upgrade completely, forcing you to go all the way back around again. With the final upgrade installed, you can breeze through the fight and then super jump after the intruder in the 4th stage, finally destroying them. And after all of that, your reward is a short conversation with Otto telling you that you did a good job, but the amp tree isn't fully back online yet, so get out there and light up 100% of the rooms. Yeah, I'll pass, thanks. I need a power nap. "1000 Amps has a simple, retro charm to it that hides satisfying puzzle solving beneath the surface. For 99% of the game, you'll be in a flow state, working your way from one room to the next, uncovering secrets, gaining new abilities, and progressing through the uncomfortable solitude of the powered down power plant. Yes, that was another pun, and no, I'm not sorry. It's not a cozy game, nor is it scary. There's a thoughtful tension to exploration. The puzzles never stray into mind-bending difficulty territory either. If you're not able to solve a room, it's usually because you're missing an ability, haven't found a specific point to teleport to, or need to combine skills in the right way. There are secrets to be found, and if you can look past the horrific excuse of an in-game map, fans of puzzle games will have a good time working towards 100% completion. However, and I cannot emphasize this enough, the final boss fight completely and utterly ruins the game for me. Right up until that moment, this was a competent, above average puzzle platformer with some neat Metroidvania elements. And then it became an important lesson in game design. Yes, there are games that allow you to fight the final boss before you really should, but in the vast majority of cases, it's possible to win if you're skilled enough. Here, the game doesn't even tell you that you shouldn't be fighting it yet. There is nothing, literally nothing, to tell you that you're missing a key ability. And it would have been so easy for Auto to tell Plug after the first death, "Hey, looks like he's stronger than we thought. You might need to power up before taking him on. Try exploring further and then come back here." This experience killed the enjoyment I had for the game and left a sour taste in my mouth, which makes this awkward from a recommendation standpoint. I think that if you're here watching this video now armed with the knowledge that you need all 6 abilities to finish the game, you'll probably enjoy it if you're a fan of puzzle platformers. If you are like me, going in blind, maybe not so much. So I think what I'm saying is that this will still be a thumbs up from me, but Brandon, if you happen to watch this, don't do that again, please. So with all of that said, my final rating for 1000 amps is Sonar out of 10. If you go in blind, you'll have a bad time, so go with information. Moving on, let's take a look at 1000 Cuts Jomaku, a 2D action-adventure game that saw Sekiro and said, "Hey, let's make that, but flat, with less pixels and more challenge." And here we are, or rather here we will be, because the version of the game that is currently on Steam is a demo. Developed and published by Banjo Toad Studio on the 9th of March 2024, this is their first game on Steam, and it should be noted that it is 100% free, or at least the demo is. I think it's safe to say that the full release will not be, but hopefully they keep the free demo up. This is actually our first case of a successfully backed Kickstarter game, and the full version is due to release later this year. So it's a shame that we're having to review it now, and no, I won't be going back to re-review it after it fully releases. But I might play it, because this game has something special going on. I mean, first of all, just look at it. The pixel art is gorgeous, and the animations are super fluid. 1000 Cuts is set in feudal Japan and tells the story of Hiroyuki and his uncle Jiro, who has trained him in the way of the samurai. One evening after training, your father is found dead, and the court puts the blame on your uncle. You're presented with a family heirloom, a sword forged from the bones of a dragon, and tasked with putting your uncle to the blade to restore honor to your family. Alternatively, you can side with your uncle by taking up the bokken, a wooden sword showing mercy to your enemies. Either way, the council has sent the army of 1000 to snuff out the rest of your family, so you'll need to fight to survive. And fighting in 1000 Cuts is swift, brutal, and deadly. Honestly, the game should have just been called One Cut, because landing a hit is instant death for either your enemy or for you. And yes, I know it's called 1000 Cuts because you're fighting the army of 1000, so that's 1 cut each, and just shh, let me make bad jokes, okay? So, let's talk about combat. Right after we talk about how terribly clunky the menu is. I played 1000 Cuts with a controller, and while navigating the menus was mostly fine, and I was pleased to see rebindable controls, pressing Y does not reset them to the defaults. You need to move the cursor to that button and then press A. Also, although it says press Y to flip, this is terribly misleading. Pressing Y actually just turns you around. 0 out of 10, do not recommend, the game is fundamentally broken. The video section has some fun filters if you're looking for a hit of nostalgia, but no resolution settings, so hopefully they add that in the full version. All in all, it's serviceable, but the unfortunate side effect of me not realizing that I hadn't actually reset the controls is that during the opening tutorial section, I had bound parry and jump to the same button, and thought this was just a design choice. An odd one, for sure, and I did eventually figure it out, but what a way to start the game. The button below interact is also meant to be rest, and I'm not sure why it isn't labelled or why it shows two overlapping icons, but it does work as intended in the game. The tutorial section is pretty straightforward, teaching you the basics of movement and combat. Combat is all about positioning and reflexes, requiring you to either get the first strike or successfully parry or dodge an attack to create an opening to counterattack. Movement can take a bit to get used to, and I'm not sure I ever really did, as needing to press a button to turn around felt a bit unnatural. I would have preferred the option to hold a button down to lock the direction hero is facing and release it to turn around. That said, combat feels pretty satisfying, especially considering that I initially thought it was quite basic. It's the timing and positioning of enemies and how they engage you in combat that makes encounters interesting, and even in the relatively short demo, only around an hour long, you'll face a wide variety of challenging situations. Admittedly, it does start slow, but I appreciate that it gives you time to warm up to it rather than hitting you in the face with a concrete wall of difficulty. Each encounter is closer to a puzzle to solve rather than an enemy to be pummeled into oblivion. There's tension when a wrong move from either side could result in instant death. It would be remiss of me not to mention, though, that for my playthrough I chose the Bokken, and while I understand the moral choice that this reflects, and I'm interested to see how it would affect the overarching narrative and gameplay, the reality is that bonking people with a wooden sword just doesn't have the same impact of visceral visuals as using a sword. I think that more work needs to go into the sound effects and visuals, especially considering that this is the hard mode that many players will be looking for. When using the Bokken, you don't kill enemies, only knock them out, and you need to knock out every enemy on screen swiftly or they will wake up again and resume the fight. Adding some punchiness to the sound effects and maybe a slight slowdown and screen shake on impact will make the Bokken combat much more satisfying. A sword can slice with ease, but a wooden sword needs much more oomph than shown to knock someone out. This also applies to the boss fights, of which there are a few included in the demo. While I loved the visuals and designs of these, they ultimately felt underwhelming in terms of mechanics. Not only do they not die in a single hit, which makes sense because it would be pretty unsatisfying, they didn't account for players using the Bokken, which somehow still slices through armor and flesh. The final fight is a 3-stage fight against a giant blacksmith, but half the fight is just running back and forth dodging a rain of fire. What makes combat in similar games feel so damn good is the back and forth of trading blows, needing to parry or dodge multiple incoming attacks in order to stay alive before delivering a lethal counterattack just feels so good. But here, it's more of a memory game where you'll die multiple times to learn the choreography of the fight because the attacks aren't telegraphed consistently in a way that allows for survival through quick reflexes alone. You need to learn the attack patterns through trial and error because there isn't any room to make mistakes that you can recover from. It's unfortunate because this is where I see both the greatest appeal and greatest weakness of the game. You need to rethink boss fight design in a way that makes it challenging but fair, and how do you balance this when a single mistake equals death for the player? Personally, I think a bit more needs to be done to telegraph attacks or provide just a moment of bullet time before an attack lands to pull off a life-saving parry. There also needs to be more visual clarity to show which attacks can be parried and which can't, and the exact timing of the parry window. Is it only immediately after the sword is raised, or does it work for the entire duration of the animation? Yes, you could work this out through trial and error, but the average player will simply get frustrated and stop playing. You could also argue that 1000 Cuts isn't targeting the average player, and to an extent, I agree. But I don't think that many Souls-like enjoyers fall into that category because they love the difficulty of the combat alone. There's a lot of choice in those games through stats, weapons, armor, and spells, and none of that is present here. It's purely skill. I think I need to pause this train of thought because it's in danger of sounding super negative, and that's not quite the truth. In reality, I love this combat system. It scratches an itch in a place I didn't know was itchy, but I worry that it's at risk of missing the mark. It's got a lot of potential, and hopefully they playtest the mechanics with a lot of people to fine-tune it before the full release of the game. And the good news is that it sounds like they're doing exactly that. When I realized that this was a demo with an upcoming release, I actually reached out to one of the devs via their Discord server to see what was up, and they let me know that although their Kickstarter page mentioned a new demo being available soon, it was sadly pushed back from July to October. They also let me know that the current version is just a proof of concept demo and is now super old and janky compared to the current version they're working on. If this is true, and I sincerely hope that it is, then it sounds like things are moving in the right direction, and I wish them luck with their development progress. "1000 Cuts is certainly more of a niche game. It's a level of difficulty that's not for everyone, and arguably not for me either, considering that I had more deaths than enemies killed by the end of the demo. And even if this is a janky pre-release proof of concept demo, I still had a good time with it. I think what stood out to me the most was how they managed to keep a simple combat system from feeling boring or stale through the encounter design and enemy moveset. The first time I got slaughtered by a demon on the rooftops was when I realized just how much they could do with this, and hopefully the full version realizes that potential. The free demo that is currently available will likely be enough to whet your appetite and get a sense for whether or not this type of game will be for you. It was certainly enough for me to place it onto my wishlist, and I'll be keeping an eye on it to see how it fares upon release. The biggest piece of advice I have for the devs right now: for the love of all that is good in this world, please take down the trailer with the AI voice. Don't associate your hard work, dedication, and talents with an AI voiceover. It demeans your work, and you should have more pride in what you've created. So, with all of that in mind, my final rating for the demo of 1000 Cuts Jomaku is prepared for combat stance out of 10. I'm ready. Bring on the full game. In a game that can only be summarized as Elon Musk's wet dream, 1000 Days to Escape is a short and sweet time management game about escaping Earth to colonize nearby planets. Developed and published by Lemon Squeezy and released onto Steam on the 26th of July 2019, you might be forgiven for thinking that this game is easy peasy. With 1000 days left until Earth runs out of oxygen, human civilization needs to find new planets, make them habitable by fixing temperatures, creating sustainable water sources, and even adjusting local gravity, and sometimes clearing out the occupying aliens. And also by creating suitable atmospheres, which really begs the question of just how badly we screwed up the conditions on Earth if we can make a hostile planet suitable, but can't fix our own planet. The settings aren't anything to write home about. Separate sound sliders are always appreciated, and I do recommend leaving the music on because it does a lot of the heavy lifting to set the mood and create a sense of urgency as the days creep closer to zero. There's no graphical settings other than resolution, which makes sense given how simple the visuals are, and no control section because they are equally simple. Everything is controlled with the mouse. 1000 days might sound like plenty of time, but the moment the game starts, the clock starts ticking, which is slightly problematic because there isn't a tutorial, so you'll lose a decent chunk of time just trying to figure out how the game works. There are different buildings to interact with that each have different functions. You've got an intergalactic map, a stats and notifications hub, a screen for launching rockets, and a shop for purchasing fuel, satellites, and terraforming items. In a nutshell, you'll need to load a rocket with the right amount of fuel and a satellite to start scanning planets and getting information about what terraforming might be needed before you can start relocating humans there. Everything costs science points though, and while you will get 100 points for scanning a planet, the fuel and satellite cost 200 in total, so if all you do is scan away like Commander Shepard looking for rare minerals, you'll quickly find yourself bankrupt. Each successfully relocated human is also worth a point, and you'll receive a bonus for completely colonizing a planet, which will be enough to keep your funds afloat. Occasionally, you'll also discover an artifact which can be used for extra points, a few extra days, or you can lose a few days to triple the points if you're feeling confident. Lastly, some planets are already occupied by hostile aliens. Well, at least we think they're hostile because they object to humans settling on their planet, which makes me wonder if we might actually be the bad guys here. To strongly recommend they relocate elsewhere, you'll need to send military instead of civilians. You'll only need to send half of the current occupying population to beat them into submission, but they weigh a lot more, meaning it won't be possible to colonize some planets until you've been able to upgrade your rocket. This means you'll be doing a lot of micromanaging to keep things moving, but it is simply a lot of busy work. And when you're juggling a lot of things on the fly, do you know what you really want? Yeah, you want stupid menial tasks, like having to physically open the hatch of the rocket to add things in manually. Sure, terraforming items can just be dropped in, but I just love to watch the days tick down while I'm pouring 2,000 liters of fuel into the rocket. Oh, and you have to shake humans in like some kind of salt shaker, which was some unexpected RSI in an already stressful situation. That said, I appreciated that if you try to overfill the rocket, the excess humans just bounce back out while making tiny Wilhelm screams. That's a nice touch. Oh, and you'd better remember to close the hatch before launching the rocket, otherwise, well, I think you can figure it out. I also appreciated that a handful of planets were puns or references to things in real life, and that if you wanted to, you could launch a rocket directly into the sun. You definitely shouldn't, but I appreciate that you can. When you run out of days, the game ends and you're presented with your final stats. Annoyingly, the exact same thing happens if you successfully relocate everyone. No victory fanfare, no congratulatory screen, just straight to the stats. It's a bit of a letdown after the ordeal to get there, but I do appreciate the global leaderboard so you can see just how poorly you'd fare if you worked for NASA. Look, I'm going to be honest, for $7.50 dues, I expected a bit more from this. Sure, there are a decent number of achievements to aim for, and the planets and conditions are randomized each time you play, but once you've beaten the game, why would you play it again? Actually, you know what? I take it back. The $7.50 dues is a fine price for this game. It's not meant to be endlessly replayable. It's something to pick up and play for an hour or two, have some fun, and then forget about. I think I feel this way because it left me wanting more, because it has some fun ideas that could be expanded upon. Now, don't misunderstand me, I don't think it's needed in this game, but if they were to make a sequel, I'd love to see elements similar to FTL, where not only are you resettling the population, but you're also having to outrun an ever-expanding black hole or alien invasion, or, and I don't say this often, a multiplayer mode would be amazing. Imagine this. One side plays as the humans, the other side plays as an alien race. Both are trying to colonize planets and need to terraform them differently in order to survive. That could result in some interesting tug-of-war gameplay between the two sides. Don't have the military power to capture a planet? That's fine. Just develop the tech to terraform their planet remotely and make the atmosphere unbreathable for them. I will admit that I was surprised that I couldn't find this game in an app store. Some of the controls, like dragging things into the rocket or shaking humans into it, felt like they were designed with touchscreens in mind, but unless it's been removed completely, that doesn't seem to be the case. There are a few spelling and grammatical errors here and there, and it suffers from a lack of a tutorial, meaning that the first attempt for most players will likely end in failure. But that can also be a good thing, as it's pretty clear what you need to do differently next time in order to win. Overall, it took me a little over 2 hours to beat the game, and I had an enjoyable time. It's not a game I'll be coming back to anytime soon, but it was a fun little time killer and a perfectly solid experience. It just doesn't do enough of anything particularly innovative to stand out from the crowd or draw a specific audience. And that's why my final rating is a starter out of 10. For the first game on Steam, it's a pretty good a starter. This next game can only really be described as, we have Mountain Blade at home. If you could distill everything about the Mountain Blade formula that makes it recognizable and then run it through a filter that removed all of the bits that make the game fun, and then develop the game in Unity, this is pretty close to what you'd expect to get. And for some reason, the most surprising part about it all is that it works. Developed and published by Red Zero and released onto Steam on the 29th of March 2023, 1000 Man General is a great tech demo, but missing any kind of real substance. The overall premise is fairly simple. There are 20 campaign missions, each set on a different map, and you're going to lead an army of up to 1000 units into battle against the other guys who may have less than 1000 units or more. Because apparently, while we are the 1000 Man General, they are the 1500 Man General. Upon launching the game, the first impressions are mixed. There's a fairly nice landscape slowly panning in the background, but the music is weirdly distorted, like something went wrong when balancing the final mix, and it sounds like my headphones are trying to break themselves apart to avoid having to play this abomination. Thankfully, this particular track is one of several that plays on the title screen and nowhere else in the game. The UI is kind of tiny on screen, so good luck reading any of it without a magnifying glass, and there aren't any UI scaling options either. The graphical options are actually fairly decent, with options to cater for lower end machines, especially regarding the number of particle effects and corpses that will stay on screen. However, the text for the window mode box does decide that it needs additional real estate. The separate music and sound sliders are always welcome, but in a bizarre choice, the only way to adjust them is by clicking the orange slider bar. You can't just click anywhere on the bar and have the slider move to that position. Something also went wrong with the credits section, as the only way to close the screen is to click on the bottom or left edge border of the close button. Anywhere else, and it fails to highlight. Clicking on play takes you to another menu where you can choose from one of 20 campaign missions, and these are unlocked in sequential order. They each come with different preset battle conditions, but you can adjust these if you're feeling a little spicy. I do love that while fog and rain get drop-down menus, day only gets a toggle. You can't choose options like sunrise, sunset, midday, etc. You're just either having a day or you're not. Also, these options are partially off the page, so they're actually A, Og, and Aim. And down the bottom of the screen we have sliders for difficulty and the unit count. You can actually double the number of units each side can control, and I guess calling the game 1000 or 2000 Man General depending on the difficulty you set was a bit of a mouthful, so I see why they simplified it. On the bright side, I do like the sketch maps on the right of the screen that roughly show the troop movements of the upcoming battle. I just don't understand why all the pre-battle UI elements couldn't be grouped together. Clicking Start Map doesn't actually start the map, it takes you to a deployment screen. Here, using the tiny UI in the bottom right that was made for ants, you can spend a predetermined number of points to purchase units in groups of 100. Every unit has 4 stats: damage, penetration, defense, and HP, and I'm immediately disappointed to see that not only are there no mounted units, there are also no ranged units. Purchasing units is simple enough, but deploying them is a bit fiddly. You need to select the unit on the left of the screen. If you have more than 100, you'll need to create a squad. The interface and process for this is a bit weird. I'd expect that if I broke a squad of 200 units into 2 100 unit squads, I would see both of these in the menu on the left. But no, you click place and nothing visually changes. But when you click in the green deployment zone, only 100 units will appear. This amount is then subtracted from the overall squad size. You also can't combine units of different types together, but then that's probably just a way to keep things simple. Units can be placed in the green zones, and then you can move the orbs to change their marching route. My instinct was to try to click and drag these to reposition them, but no, you have to click once to select it, then click where you want to place it, and repeat this for all 3 orbs, for every unit you want to reposition. You also have options in the lower left to adjust their tactics like compactness, aggressiveness, movement speed, and movement delay. I personally never really messed around with these, it honestly wasn't necessary, but extra customization creates some replayability, even if only a little. Once you've got everything positioned to your liking, it's finally time to dive into battle. Click the tiny start button in the bottom left, and you're off. The first mission does include some tutorial messages, which is great. It also lets you know that it has all the depth and complexity as a tepid glass of water. Move with WASD, hold left click to attack, press E or Q to change between offensive and defensive orders for nearby units, and just try not to die. So do you know what you can't do? You can't direct units mid-combat. Yes, you can obviously use the planning phase to set up flanking maneuvers, but you've got no ability to adapt if things don't go according to plan. You also don't have the ability to block attacks. Sure, you have a pretty substantial pool of health, but if you die, it's game over, and getting surrounded can deplete your health pretty quickly. What I will say is that the gameplay feels somewhat technically impressive. Even in the default mode, you've got around 2,000 individual units on screen, each with basic AI that tells them which target to attack, when to defend, targets to chase, or when to flank. Sure, the graphics are pretty flat and basic, the 3D models are low poly, there are only a handful of unique animations, and even on maximum graphics you have a draw distance of about 10 meters, meaning you'll constantly see details popping in, but... This is where I'd normally mention a positive, but I've already mentioned the only one I had, so let's just move on. In all fairness, the game does a decent job of mixing up each mission with different combinations of enemy units, flanking maneuvers, and more. I especially liked one of the later missions where your army is surrounded, so you need to find a way to not get overwhelmed. There was something satisfying about decimating one enemy squad and then using that ground to form a defensive position for the remaining troops. After the 20th mission, you've done everything, but the game does nothing to celebrate this. Well, technically you get an achievement, and it's kind of telling that only 6% of people get this far into the game. 1000 Man General simply feels half-baked, and yes, I checked, and no, it's not in early access, although it certainly feels like it should be. A combination of Mountain Blade and Dynasty Warriors should be a surefire success, and yet it feels like the worst parts of both games. It's slow, but not methodical. You get large-scale battles with thousands of troops, but none of the sense of control or power that comes from being a general. I'm not trying to make a habit of asking more from games, but without either a story, a multiplayer mode, a custom battle mode, modding tools, alternative weapons, the ability to issue orders mid-combat, or at least more depth to the combat than holding down left click and sometimes pressing right click to use a buff, this game simply isn't worth $14.50 dues. I'd be happy if they added in just one of the things from that list. Well, maybe not happy, but certainly happier. They should at least lower the price to something around the $5 mark. I'm still kind of impressed that they managed to get this working so smoothly in Unity, but it feels like they were so deep into seeing if they could do it, they forgot to stop and question if they should do it. Ultimately, I was just left feeling like this game was really underbaked, and given the dev has released 2 other games onto Steam since this one, I doubt they'll be coming back to update it anytime soon, which is a bit of a shame because I do find a certain amount of charm in its simplicity. With more love, care, and time, it could have been sitting alongside something like Totally Accurate Battle Simulator or Besiege. Okay, maybe a lot more time in the oven, but I think you get what I mean. And that's why my final rating for 1000 Man General is corpse removal out of 10. Unless you're a necromancer that specializes in reviving dead games, it's probably time to bury this one. If you're looking for a game that is only playable in a tiny window and that you can probably beat in the time it takes me to review it, then this might be the game for you. Released on Steam on the 22nd of January 2025 and both developed and published by Dancing Dots, 1000 Missiles Defense of Tornwa looks like Minesweeper but plays like a poorly thought out tower defense game, because that's basically what it is. Side note, it also launches command prompt when you launch the game, and I was legitimately concerned that I had installed some kind of malware that was about to hold my PC hostage. Thankfully this wasn't the case, but I think dealing with that problem might have been far more interesting than whatever this attempt of a game is. There's no menu or tutorial, you're just dumped straight into the action with missiles already flying. If you wanted to know how to play the game, you'd better have read the store page, which explains the general premise and mechanics. In a nutshell, your game is randomly generated and you need to defend the buildings from 1000 missiles by placing anti-air cannons to win. Factories produce resources that are needed to build more defenses, and willpower affects how quickly they're produced. Lose too many buildings and your willpower will plummet, causing a snowballing effect where you're producing fewer resources, so you can't build as many defenses, so you lose more buildings, causing your willpower to drop even further. Annoyingly, even the store page instructions fail to explain everything because there is an error. It correctly mentions that you can upgrade a built AA system with either a right or left click. However, which click you use is meant to decide what kind of upgrade you make, but the description is exactly the same between the two on the store page. I think one is meant to be a rapid fire gun and the other is meant to be long range, but it's so difficult to see anything in the game that I can't really tell what is shooting at what. I'm just placing things down and hoping for the best. Heck, half the time I don't even see when a building is destroyed. I just look over later and notice that an entire suburb has been leveled down to rubble. Oops. It's bizarre to me that they added a sound effect for clicking, but didn't add sounds for destroying missiles or when buildings are destroyed. So I guess if you like clicking ASMR, then you might like this, but that's an incredibly small niche to cater to. Missiles will enter the screen from every side except the left, so at least you've got some idea of where to position your defenses other than just sprinkling them everywhere and hoping for the best. I do love that they're visible before actually entering the play area, which makes me wonder if that's the actual void or just land not shown on the map because it belongs to another country that they don't care about. It is important to note that while you can build and upgrade AA systems, you can't build anything else. So once buildings or factories are destroyed, they're gone for good. And because you have no ability to instruct your AA systems to aim at certain areas or prioritize specific things, gameplay basically boils down to a very simple logic tree. Is there an available space? If yes, do you have at least one resource? If yes, build an AA. If no, wait and then build an AA. If there are no available spaces and you have at least 2 resources, upgrade an AA. Left or right click to do it, it doesn't matter, as again, according to the store page, they both do the same thing. And even if they actually didn't, I have no metrics to prove that. If you manage to survive for about 5 minutes, you'll win. Congratulations, your country was only mostly destroyed by missiles. In the words of Joshua from War Games, the best way to win is not to play. Or in the case of 1000 Missiles, it's to not buy the game at all, considering that it costs $4.50 dues, which is about $4.50 more than it should cost. What I really struggle to understand is how they managed to release a game literally 13 years earlier that looks to be superior in almost every single way, and yet thought this was perfectly acceptable. It means I can't even excuse how utterly incompetent it is due to someone's first ever attempt at making a game. I would honestly be happier if the message that opened when the game launched said, "I'm sorry that you bought this game." I always try to look for the positives in games, and it's depressing when the most positive things I can say are that it runs and that it's playable. It's certainly not replayable though. Due to the sheer lack of player control, you can't even really compete for high scores or speedruns. It's not bad enough to make me angry or upset about poor design choices. It just simply chooses to exist and seems to be perfectly content with that. As far as I can tell from SteamDB, I am the only person to have ever purchased or played this game, and somehow that's not a fact I feel proud of. And that's why my final rating for 1000 Missiles Defense of Tornwa is you lose out of 10. It's exactly how I felt after realizing just what this quote-unquote game is. Alright, we're on to the final game for today's video, so get ready to leave a comment about which games you think were the best and worst from today's selection. Developed and published by LTZ Inc., 1000 Needles feels like a flash game from the early 2000s that somehow made its way onto Steam in 2022, and not in a good way. I'm talking about those flash games that get less than 10 ratings in total and average 2 out of 5 stars, the ones you stumble upon when you were truly desperate for something to play but didn't have the money to be able to buy something halfway decent. I'll be honest, this game is just an incredibly basic platformer and nothing more. Collect all of the tools to fix the water tower and then stand under it to win. The backgrounds are cute and colourful, but everything is just inconsistent enough in art style that I feel confident saying that these are stock assets from elsewhere. In fact, I was so sure that I did a Google reverse image search, and sure enough, it's available on GameDeveloperStudio.com as a paid asset for $4.95. However, they kind of messed up how it was implemented, as while the walk cycle works just fine, the jumping animation starts too late and ends too early, making every jump look very weird. Hitbox detection is also a major issue, making the core part of the genre incredibly tedious. Look at how embarrassingly many times I died to these ground level spikes because I tried to jump over them but was actually jumping into the corner of their hitbox. Other than that, the actual moment-to-moment gameplay is mostly fine. Things function how you'd expect them to function, but the level design isn't particularly interesting. Everything is confined to a single screen, which limits creativity, but nothing is introduced beyond platforms and spikes. We've seen with games like one-screen platformer that being limited to a single screen can lead to some great results if you get creative with how you use the space, but that was absolutely not the case here. I think two of my favourite features are how after every level you get kicked back to the level select menu, which needs to be navigated with the mouse despite the rest of the game using arrow keys, and the second is how on the main menu, if you go into the level select and then press escape to go back, the music resets. It doesn't reset between levels, only when you go back out of a menu. And I can only assume that they programmed it so when the main menu screen is shown, the single music track in the game is triggered to start, not realizing that there is more than one way to get to the main menu. Lastly, I can only assume from the title screen and the choice of a porcupine as the player character that the game is set in Africa, so I'm confused as to why none of the backgrounds in any of the levels look remotely African. But look, if you're working with pre-made assets, I get it. You need to work with what you have. And I've said this before and I'll say it again, pre-made assets are fine. But you need to compensate for that by using them in an interesting way. If your game is fun, players probably won't notice the stock assets. After completing the 12th and final level, the game doesn't even end. No celebrations, no thanks for playing my game, no achievements either. You're just left on the level select screen with everything unlocked. To be fair, it'll only take you 10 minutes at most to get here, so at best you deserve a participation trophy. And to be even more fair, that sums up how I felt about the game. I was participating, not playing, and certainly not enjoying it. I don't have much more to say about the game, so why don't we talk about the developer for a moment, because I find their Steam profile simply fascinating, and I think you will too. So obviously we've got 1000 Needles, which released in 2022. What's wild is that they actually released 21 games in 2021 and 9 games in 2022. That's a development pace that any company would be envious of, and the majority of games have a positive rating overall. Sure, most of the games are either 2D platformers, Doom clones, or top-down RPGs that seem to be in either buggy or unfinished states, judging by the reviews. So, what happened? Why did they stop? Well, I happened to notice the text saying that 30 items had been excluded from my search due to my store preferences. Now, I have the store set to not display nudity or adult games, as for one, those are excluded from this series, and two, I don't want to accidentally show them when capturing footage in the Steam store or searching for games during a live stream. So while I can't show any of these games here, just know that they fall into either the category of 2D puzzle or memory game, and LTZ Inc. has been pumping these out since 2022 all the way up to their latest release, Sexy Ladies, on the 3rd of January 2025. I'm honestly surprised that there haven't been at least 5 others released already this year, especially considering how much easier these must be to produce than an actual game with, you know, mechanics and stuff. I just find something so wonderfully funny about the fact that this developer's library is basically a coin flip as to whether you get a normal game or straight up NSFW art being sold as a quote-unquote game. So with that in mind, my final rating for 1000 Needles is... oh god. What actually is there in this game that I can use for a rating? Oh! 1000 Needles out of 30,000 out of 10. The number of needles they got correct is also the amount of game I found enjoyable. And yes, that's about 3%. Welcome to the end of the video. As a reminder, don't forget to check out the gaming book club Slow Game Club. Use the discount code Graeldon20 for 20% off the annual subscription and support low-income kids getting a foot into the game dev industry while getting access to some great games. As always, thank you to all the Crusaders and Templar Knights for supporting the channel, especially our noble knights Azazel, Daydos, Kartoffeljäger 3, Lexus LFA 554, Matey 8, Neggy Malevolent, Chev _, and the Crabs. And an extra special thank you to our 3 Knights of the Holy Grail, Alive Chicken 108, Conversations with Fyuk, and Freaky Feline. If you'd like to support the channel, check out the membership options below, or just remember to like and subscribe, that helps too. That's all for now, so if you've made it this far, here's a sneak peek of the next game. And until next time, take care.